All right. I'm Nathan Stoltman, by the way. That's my cat, Doshi. He produces the show. How did I get Nick on the show? I really don't know. He said he's tuned in for a little bit of a few streams. I know a lot of people have been trying to get him on. I know there was some story about Fox Day looking to debate him. I always have something about people who say they want to debate somebody. I just want to talk to him. We do a lot of good, relevant interviews on this show. The last interview we did was with John McAfee when he was the most exciting thing on the internet. Chat's going to be okay because I'm going to turn off stickers. Somebody said the chat's going to be useless. It won't be useless once I turn off stickers. I was just letting people get their sticker fix in while we're getting started. But probably time to turn it off. We have this show. If you look at the demographics for this particular show, I have like 0% of listeners under 24. So it is exciting to talk to people who are a little bit younger. For whatever reason, we appeal to an older audience. I'm 40 years old, so I can't pretend I know what it's like to be a Zoomer. But I lived at home until 2 weeks ago. I was living with my dad until 2 weeks ago. So I think Nick living at home is totally okay. I think it's brilliant, actually. He's 21 years old. So everybody goes boomer. That's funny. Yeah, I feel like one. We were talking about that in the show. We were talking about that in the pre-show. We kind of do feel like boomers.
Bit of a lost generation.
Yeah, we're in the lost generation. We're kind of Generation X, me and my wife. So, but Nick's single. It's not the right time to be renting or buying, that's for sure. So let me get into what we're going to be talking about so I can make sure to cover it all. I am going to talk to Nick Fuentes about the Holocaust thing. And I'm pretty sure the reason I asked him to be on my show was after I read what he said to the Washington Post, which was that the Holocaust was the systematic persecution of Jews, and that 6 million died. Okay. And I've been listening to his show, and I'm going to play you the clips that I have to educate me about what he really thinks. Now, let me find... Ben Shapiro's come after him. Everybody's come after him. He's basically the most controversial thing on the internet. Let me see where he says. This is from the Washington Post. Okay, great. He acknowledges that the Holocaust was a systematic persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. He said, quote, "I've never denied the Holocaust," unquote. All right, so let's talk about the Cookie Monster joke, just so I don't have to play it on the show. This is from a long time ago. It came up because he's under attack by other conservatives who think that, are upset that he's disrupting their monopoly on conservative talk. So this is the clip. And again, it's from a while ago, but it was brought up after Nick came to prominence with these people interrupting, what are they called? I can't even remember what they're called. The real Bill Clinton is here. It says, don't talk about Uncle Bill. No, we probably won't. It won't come up. We'll talk about immigration. We're going to talk about the gay question. We're maybe going to talk about Catholicism if we have time. We want to talk about women voting. Different issues that I would... It's not a debate, but just to understand his point of view on it. I'll probably give my point of view on it. I'd like to talk about his support for Donald Trump, or his professed support for Donald Trump. Let me play you the cookie question, the famous cookie question, so I don't have to play it on the show with Nick. We have about 15 minutes till he joins us.
Max says, if I take 1 hour to cook a batch of cookies, and Cookie Monster has 15 ovens, working 24 hours a day, every day for 5 years. How long does it take Cookie Monster to make 6 million batches of cookies? I don't know. That's a good question. Certainly, oh, no. It doesn't really sound correct to me. Wait a second. It takes 1 hour to cook a batch of cookies, and you have 15 ovens, probably in 4 different kitchens, right? Doing 24 hours a day, every day for 5 years. How long would it take you to make 6 million? I don't know. It certainly wouldn't be 5 years, right? The math doesn't seem to add up there. The math doesn't quite seem to add up there. I don't think you'd result in 6 million. Maybe 200 to 300,000 cookies. And I think the Red Cookie Association said something like that, probably 200 to 300,000 cookies baked, probably. And in addition, in this hypothetical, I imagine that if you took aerial photographs over the kitchens, you would need to see certain smokestacks to release the smoke from baking the cookies, and the smokestacks would project certain shadows, but I guess they're not visible in the aerial photographs taken over the kitchens. Moreover, if you look at the soil texture, it's really not deep enough for mass cookie storage underground. And so there's a lot of things. In the cookie kitchen, they say that the ovens are wooden and they have windows on them and they're not totally secure. And the ovens that they use, they actually did sort of an ad hoc use of that particular kind of oven, even though they made a perfectly good design for ovens for a different purpose, for delousing. I mean, for something else. So none of it really adds up. I don't know. It just kind of doesn't really make sense, this crazy cookie analogy. You have to be, that's sort of an esoteric story. That's from Cookie Right. You wouldn't understand that if you're just sort of passing through, if you're just a normie. So 6 million cookies, I don't buy it. That's all irony. I'm an irony bro. That's all irony. I love and respect everyone. Everything that the government says is true.
All right. Everything that the government said is true. So I've been listening to his show. I've been doing research. And I was just listening to this live stream called Charlie Kirk Concedes to Groypers, Calls for Good Faith Dialogue. This is from November 22nd. And this is where he addresses why he told the Washington Post what he told them. Okay.
All of that happened, all right? Look, somebody called me up from the Washington Post, and they said, "Do you deny the Holocaust?" And I said, "No." I said, "I would never deny the Holocaust. I would never deny the Holocaust. I have never denied the Holocaust." He said, "Do you believe the official story from the museums that, there's a systematic killing of 6 million people and blah, blah, blah?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Yes, of course." I said, "I believe all of it." Elie Wiesel, he graduated from my school, Boston University. And even though he lied about the whole thing, even though in his book he was caught in multiple bald-faced lies about what was happening, I don't care. I still believe it, okay? The stories about the masturbation machines, jerking them off to death, which was written about, the lampshades, the bars of soap, the roller coasters, I believe it all. Why would they have any reason to lie? Why would they have any reason to lie or even exaggerate, right? I said I never denied it. And beyond that, why would they have any need to exaggerate it or, come out with this ridiculous stuff?
Sorry. Hopefully that won't happen during the show. Okay. Hold on.
Whatever you want. And reason being is I like to be alive. I want to be alive. I don't want to get assassinated like other people. Now, it's not to say that I don't believe the facts. I do. I believe the facts. But, also I don't want to get killed like people that have denied it. So that's why I make it very clear. I have not denied, of course, because I believe every part of it, but also because I don't want to get assassinated or get my house exploded like has happened to other people that have, I want to be clear, I made a joke, but people that have said similar things unironically have had their warehouses burned to the ground, people show up to their doors threatening them, they've been assassinated, and for good reason, they were denying something that obviously happened, and it's worth getting killed over that, It's worth it. People tell me they deny the moon landing, and I'm like, oh, you deny things that actually happened? Well, that should be criminalized like it is in Europe with other things. So
I assume he's being ironic about criminalizing the moon landing. We definitely, it's a fact that we didn't go to the moon. but Nick is still getting based and red-pilled on other subjects. We have to ask him about 9/11 and other subjects that he's afraid to talk about because he's afraid they might kill him. So you're getting a good preview of the show. Everything's ironic. Everything's ironic, even though he's obviously done a lot of research. Let me see what else we're gonna ask him about that though. If we have time, we'll talk to him about his support for Donald Trump. This is an old clip where he disses Donald Trump, but he's gone over that on his show a number of times. He says, "Well, let me play it for people who are interested." This is something he said years ago, apparently when he was either 19 or 17 years old or something. It's criticism of Donald Trump and basically saying that there should be another candidate. It's 151. Okay, let me play this.
Now, everyone's been talking about the Trump phenomenon, and it is important and historic. What you have to consider about Donald Trump is that he's not an ideologue. He is an opportunist. He's not a conservative, and it doesn't matter what he is because all he wants is power. Now, it's clear that he's not a conservative. If you look at any history of him on the issues, he's been pro-abortion, he's been anti-property rights, he's pro-protectionism in this election. His immigration policy resembles Patrick Starr's. We're going to take the immigrants and push them somewhere else. It's basically ridiculous. Now, Donald Trump is doing so well because he appeals to the Republicans, not in fighting the Democrats, but in fighting the establishment. We haven't fought the Democrats since 2012, since Mitt Romney ran against Barack Obama. Since then, the Republicans have not been fighting the Democrats, but other Republicans, rhinos, Republicans in name only. And Donald Trump has served a very important function in breaking the monopoly of John Boehner, of Paul Ryan, of Reince Priebus, and having people of, by, and for the people they were intended to represent. Now, having said that, Donald Trump has served his function. His time is over. It's time for serious candidates. Let the adults talk, Donald. We don't need...
Sorry, I'm just setting up my split screen and everything. Oh, and Benjamin is cringe. Yeah, well, I have learned some of the lingo. We have cringe. We have, he was talking about getting a GF. He talks about, what else? What are the other things? Oh, based and red-pilled. Based and red-pilled. We do want to talk to him about whether and how he wants to get a GF. I do want to talk about that. And then once he gets a GF, then it's time maybe to move out of the house, have his own space, start thinking about setting up a family. Groypers, I had to learn what a groyper was. Apparently it's a cozy Pepe. Groyper is a cozy Pepe. Hello, Epic Department. One thing he said that I thought was hilarious. Somebody was trolling him, and he said, "Oh yeah, troll the cool genius who has an epic show." Yeah, troll the cool genius who has an epic show. That's what I should say to people. Based. Epic check. That's a new one. People are ready. And also, I do want to talk about the fact that everybody says they are incels, right? That everybody who's following Nick is a bunch of incels. And I was going to say, if everybody's saving themselves for marriage, then you aren't involuntarily celibate. So you guys aren't technically incels. We love the Joker stuff. We think that's great. We did like that movie quite a bit. Volcel, voluntarily celibate. Okay, got it. Voluntarily celibate. Volcel. Okay, great. Did you guys all take the November challenge? I heard that's anti-Semitic now. That if you're doing the no nut November, that it's anti-Semitic. I heard that on, who was I listening to the other day? Or just yesterday, Vincent James. Everybody's on DLive now. Everybody's on DLive now. So there's a lot of stuff to watch over here. I moved to DLive immediately when PewDiePie went to DLive. because YouTube, I'm not well liked on YouTube. My shit got shut down. Too controversial, apparently. What Nick doesn't want to learn about, maybe I'll mention it to him, is Sandy Hook. That's the one thing. Forget the Holocaust. People call him PewDieFuck. Well, I came over just because I figured it was going to happen. I figured that must mean DLive was going to get going. PewDieFuck. All right, that's okay. We're learning. Nick said he's supposed to be joining us at 2 p.m. Central Time. We're in the same time zone. I'm in Texas. He's in a suburb of Chicago, allegedly. Since we're waiting for Nick, let me just give you guys a preview of the new Truth Revolution clothing. You can take a look at our blog post explaining what we're going to be doing if you go to truthclothing.io. This is a blog post from today, grown and made in the USA, that is going to explain what we're doing, what we're all about going forward, and the way we're trying to support American farmers, fair wages, and environmental responsibility as well. And it's an awesome t-shirt too. So that's going to be here. My wife just posted it. Freedom of voice. It also exemplifies what we care about the most, which is free speech. And one of the reasons we support Nick, regardless of whether we agree with him or not. So those are available now for pre-order delivery by Christmas. And you can do something really good with your money. Of course, it costs more because we're paying Americans to do the work. That's why people don't want to do it, is because it costs more. It costs us twice as much per t-shirt to make these. So, and we're putting in the order today. So it took us some planning and a lot of research to get this done. My wife is a fashion designer. She always felt like she wasn't able to do what she wanted to do in the corporate world. But since we're our own thing, we decided to do it. We're taking a big risk. People don't know, we don't know if people are going to be willing to pay a little bit extra, but we think so. And you got to take risks sometimes to do the right thing. So I'm going to go into that after Nick's on the show. I'll try to tell the whole story the right way. But we can also, outsource our work too, just like Teespring. We're all set up. So that's our first shirt. That's the proof of business model. We want to prove that people are willing to pay extra for something that's ideologically consistent. So that's what we're doing. And I'm going to talk about that after the show. That's at truthclothing.io. Okay, that's our clothing brand, which is mostly run by my wife, who's sitting over here. Not a grifter. I don't think it's in fact, it's just the opposite. What can you say? It supports American farmers, and we're serious about that. Most cotton grown in America gets shipped overseas. This is stuff that doesn't have to travel on anything but a truck. Just a few 100 miles for the whole thing. So I'm going to talk about that after the show. I know it's, it is about making income, but to be honest, we're putting a big investment in. It's not like, we actually have to shell out for a bigger order than we've ever done. So, thanks for the subscriptions, Genbug. Thanks for throwing those down. Nick's eating a Big Mac. That's what people say. He still eats fast food. He's not quite based enough and red-pilled enough to have gotten off that yet. But that's okay. People evolve over time. We don't expect Nick to believe the same things he believes now in 10 years. We think people learn, they develop. He reads a lot of books. So, all right, anyway. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. People say Nick is never late. Well, he did confirm with me, and he did confirm on his Telegram account, too, that he's coming on. So we're okay. We're good filling time. I was trying to get a clip of Owen. Owen says that Nick poops in his pants and that he's still breastfeeding, which I don't think are true. And then people give him a hard time for living at home, which I think I already said. I don't think is a dumb thing at all. Someone asked what his name is. His name's Doshi. He has his own merchandise too, believe it or not. There he is. There, I hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, Nick, what's up?
Nothing much. What's up with you?
Not much. I don't have you on camera. Is
Just audio fine for today?
Oh, sure. Sure, I guess so. People do want to see you, though.
Didn't realize it'd be video. My desk's a little bit messy here, so.
Oh, man. All right, no problem. No problem. No problem. I'll be okay with that. I have it set up for a split screen and everything. All right.
Apologies. Should have clarified. I should have clarified. I should have checked.
No problem. That's all right. We do a video show here. All right. Well, I'm all set. And I'm already live on DLive. You have a bunch of your people tuned in already. I have questions for you too. So let me just go ahead and start the stream on YouTube, and then we'll get going. Okay. I have you for what, about 45 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
All right. Great. All right. Here's YouTube, and I'll go live. All right, welcome everybody to the Lift the Veil show. It is Tuesday, November 26, 2019. Joining me today is probably the most exciting thing going on the internet right now, and merging over into the real world with all the stuff that's going on in the conservative movement, questions about the conservative movement. Nick Fuentes actually leading a group of what they call, right, America First, and effectively, throwing a whole wrench in the system as far as conservative Inc., as far as the accepted orthodoxy, as far as what it means to be a conservative. Really excited to have you join me, Nick. Unfortunately, Nick's desk is messy today, so I don't have him joining me by video, but I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Okay, great. Well, we'll see after we get through the questions. I support, first of all, we don't agree on everything, but I really support freedom of speech and freedom of ideas. I think you're obviously really well read, and I do want to ask you, specifically about what America First means, about what the values are, and I've been trying to do as much research on that as I can since basically, Nick Fuentes, the phenomenon kind of exploded recently. So the first thing I'm going to ask you about, and this isn't a gotcha question or anything, I know you don't want to talk about it, but I have a completely different point of view than most people, and that's about the Holocaust. Okay, I believe I had you, I asked you to come on my show after I saw what you said to the Washington Post, and I had a completely different reaction than most people to the Cookie Monster clip, okay, which was to immediately grab my calculator and start figuring out, exactly how the math works out. And initially I came to way over 6 million because I assumed that each cookie represented one Jew, but it was every batch of cookies. And you went into the details. It sounds like you've done a lot of research on it. You talked about soil samples. You talked about overhead photography. And then when I saw, and you don't know this, but I did make I made a Periscope video specifically saying that questioning how many people died in the Holocaust should not be considered anti-Semitic, and it should be something that we're able to talk about without being accused of being anti-Semitic. I defended what you said. And then when I saw what you said in the Washington Post, which is they said, without quoting you, he said, that's you, Nick, he acknowledges that the Holocaust was the systematic persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. And then I was listening to your show, and you basically said that the reason you said that was you're afraid they were going to kill you. So can you talk a little bit about that, and can you talk a little bit about that and why you decided to to say that you believe the official story?
Yeah, well, if you paid attention on my show, I said that's only one reason. I don't know if that's a primary reason, but I like to be alive, and I wanted to point out for people that might be in the dark on this that it's actually illegal to question the Holocaust in something like 20 countries in Europe. They actually lock you up and put you in jail. There's a pretty lengthy history detailed in a really good article by Ron Oons on Oons Review about this subject. And it talks about the history of people that have gone up against the official narrative. And yeah, people have been outright assassinated, murdered. They've been harassed at their homes. If they write books about this stuff, they get their warehouses set on fire and burned to the ground. So people that talk about this subject, they don't typically fare well. You know, if they don't outright get killed, their reputation's destroyed and so on. So I said that is only one of the reasons why I would tell the Washington Post that I believe the 6 million number. The other reason is that, of course, I totally do. Of course, I believe the number. Any skepticism is just joking. It's just tongue-in-cheek silliness. And of course, these two reasons why I believe the number have nothing to do with each other. There's no connection there at all. So, but primarily, the reason I've gone at this subject with the attitude that it's really just not my priority. You know, what I'm trying to do, I'm not a Holocaust scholar. I'm not a World War II scholar. And what I aim to do is not to change people's minds about about World War II or anything that happened 80 years ago. My aim is to talk about things that are happening now. You know, my aim is to talk about the genocide, not against Jewish people that happened 100 years ago, but the genocide happened against white people now. So, I mean, that's been my real answer is sort of a non-answer. It's, is it 6 million, 6 trillion, whatever. I really want to talk about America first,
Right. Well, the only thing is to me, it was a letdown because I like to see people that are consistent and that are upfront about what they believe, because to me, I think people should be able to question that. If I were asked that question by the Washington Post, I'd say I have no idea. I have no idea how many people died in the Holocaust. And I'd like to see the evidence for that it was 6 million. Obviously the Red Cookie Foundation said it was a lot less than that. And you had done some research, obviously, as well. So, to me, it's about being, more pure, about saying what you mean, because based on what you've said, based on what people can interpret from what you said, you don't believe it, right? So, and I don't want to press you on it. Like I said, this isn't a gotcha thing, but I want to hear people tell the truth. And when I looked at that, I wondered to myself, what else is Nick saying that he doesn't believe? Because I know that when you said that to the Washington Post, you don't believe it. So that's what concerned me about it. And I want to understand that the rest of this thing, women not voting, no immigration, I want to know that that's what you really feel too, and that that's not just a joke,
Yeah, I understand that. It's just that the problem becomes the label is not really designed to. Here's the trick: is I understand what you're saying about being upfront and being straightforward and so on, but I think this ignores the political reality that we're engaged in a war over information and rhetoric and politics, and our enemies are not playing that same way. They're not playing the straight up good faith dialogue. They're playing a very dirty game. They're very dishonest, and they have more money than we do. They have more control over media than we do. And so the problem becomes when we try to engage Charlie Kirk on immigration, for example, or on homosexuals in the movement, or on the dual loyalty Israel question, they try to reframe it and make it about a passing remark that I made a year ago.
Right.
And when people reframe it in the context of, well, he's a Holocaust denier, the intention there is to delegitimize and discredit my views. And so reframing the conversation around, again, a passing remark I made about something that and I would agree with you, I don't really know. I wasn't there. I wasn't in the Holocaust. It's also something that I don't frankly care about, in the sense that, again, like I said, I'm focused on what's happening in the country today. So people recognize that on my show, I will engage in irony or post-irony. You can look into what that means, to be provocative or to get people thinking about certain subjects. But, when it comes to my hard and fast views, I think it's pretty easy to distinguish what's unironic and what's ironic. But I tell the Washington Post these things because I recognize the reality of the situation.
Right. Well, so you're saying that because the other side fights dirty, that there's no way to be intellectually honest because we're in a dirty fight. And, well, when I say we, you're in a dirty fight, and it requires that you bend as well, and that sometimes you have to basically deny things that you believe are true or not talk about things because it's a dirty fight, right? So do you feel like that's being, I like to see honesty, straightforwardness, and whatever the consequences are, I have trouble basically saying things different than what I really believe. So do you think in this fight, right, if the other side is being dishonest, if they're being disingenuous, that you also in some ways have to be dishonest and disingenuous just to win the fight that you're in?
No, that's actually a really good question. I don't think it requires us to be dishonest or disingenuous. I just think it requires us to be prudent. And this is one of the criticisms I've gotten from a lot of people because I talk about optics and strategy and things like that. For example, people will say, oh, well, you want to be optical. In other words, you want to have a presentation that is trying to appease the people or the media or whatever is popular. And that's never been what I'm about is lying. It's always about, again, prudence. So in this case, the conversation that we want to have is about mass immigration, not about the Holocaust. And so is it dishonest to say, hand wave that away and say what you need to say in order to focus on the real issue? Or is that prudent? Like I said, I'm not an expert. I really don't care about the subject. You said, well, you must know a lot about it. The things that I mentioned on that show, I don't even think the Holocaust revisionists are keen on a lot of things I said. I actually got a couple of emails from people that said, well, that's actually not like the Red Cross number. Somebody sent me an email and said, well, that Red Cross number is not what Holocaust revisionists like to use. What they like to use is X, Y, and Z. So I'm not even sure if the Holocaust revisionists find those arguments to be compelling. I made that as a passing remark. It was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, but also meant to be a little bit provocative. But I would say it's not dishonest to say that we want to keep the frame on the conversation we want to have, which is about immigration. And, people that are experts on that subject or care about that subject or they're evangelists on that subject, we can leave that to them. And this is sort of what I'm going to do. I think it's a very naive thing to say that, we'll just go to our deathbed, being saying exactly what it is every time. I think it ignores, again, the reality of the language game that is played. I think it's a very naive way of thinking. Just because you're the most principled, autistically principled guy, I think that's, maybe something that people find attractive, but ultimately I think it's a losing strategy. And what I'm after is political goals. I'm not somebody that's, I think we on our side look at, for example, people that talk about the Constitution as one example. They say, well, we just must respect the Constitution. This kind of slavish commitment to abstractions, that's kind of why we've lost tangible things in the world. We've lost tangible political power. We have tangibly lost our way of life because of this commitment to a lot of these abstract principles that, again, it goes back to they're not even prudent to begin with. I don't even know if it's necessarily a commendable trait to say, oh, yes, I will engage in any conversation anytime. I think even the Bible says there's a time and place for everything. So that's my position on it.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, there are other topics that you're also not going to be addressing because of the optics to it. Because I heard you say that, and maybe we'll talk about whether you're going to get a GF one of these days, but I heard you say that, and that's your language there, which I'm trying to learn, right? So if you get a girlfriend, you'd like to be sitting around watching a 9/11 documentary. So is that something you're never going to talk about either because it's not part of this movement? It's not right for the optics?
Well, I didn't say I'd never talk about it, and I think I actually have talked about it. I've gone on a lot of gaming streams. I forget what exactly I said on my show this year for 9/11, but I think I said a lot about it on my show this year. It's not about never talking about things. It's about recognizing that in this moment, there is a responsibility, I think, for people like me to keep it focused on the issues. I wouldn't say I'm a politician, but I would say that like a politician, I'm not out there saying things just to say things. I'm not out there, just nakedly going after the truth, or I'm not a journalist. Like a politician or like other people, we have very specific goals that we're trying to accomplish, and so in trying to accomplish those goals, we have to focus on certain subjects and refrain from talking about certain things, because of course we know how the media likes to derail the conversation, like this. So
right
I would say, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I don't mean to derail the conversation. It's actually just stuff that's important to me. I on my show, I do look, I look into things. I like to cover everything, and I've covered a lot of topics that you just can't talk about. It's basically gotten me kicked off of YouTube. Talk about Sandy Hook. I've talked about other, false flags and things like that, and it's gotten me in a lot of trouble. It's basically why I ended up coming over to DLive, because they want to shut that stuff down. So to me, it is important, but I am kind of autistic, and so I do have that kind of thing about me where I have to say, what I found out, what's on my mind. But let's go to what, you do want to talk about. And you said, actually, I want to ask you about this. You said it's not what we want to do. So who is we? I see this as really you at the head of this movement right now, as far as I can tell. But you said we. Who is we? Are there other people coordinating with you or coming up with strategy with you?
Well, first, I do just want to say, when I say autistic, I don't necessarily mean that as a negative. Just to address really quickly what you said a moment ago, and not to drag it on, but I do just want to say, I do question a lot of things you're talking about. I'm committed to rethinking some of these things, and asking the right questions. And I know other people engage in that. And I support that and I engage with that. But, just in terms of specificity, it's a very specific time with specific goals. And so so I just want to make that clarification that I'm not opposed to a lot of the things that you're getting at here, especially with 9/11. I've called that out a lot. There's a lot of BS around 9/11. One of our groypers did the question about dancing Israelis, so
right.
It's not like we're shying away completely from that. But anyway, back to the question you just asked about we. People have speculated a lot about me. They've said that I'm like controlled opposition, or I'm working for, I've heard people say, oh, he's working for Steve Bannon. He's working for Alex Jones. He's working for Milo. Everybody knows that it's just me. When it comes to America First, when it comes to my show, I produce it, I write it, I host it. There's nobody else involved in this for my show. For the Groyper Wars, when I say we, I mean this sort of loose coalition of, I would say, other content creators, the Groypers, people asking the questions. I use sort of like a royal we, speaking of, we who share these common goals, common ideas, America First. People like Michelle Malkin or Faith Goldie or Patrick Casey, Jake Lloyd, Scott Greer, these kinds of people. So, of course, I try to only speak for myself, and it is only me doing the show, but the Groyper War has been sort of a team effort, and many people sort of made me out to be a representative of that. I think I inspired a lot of it, so I tend to use the we sometimes for that.
Sure. No, I understand. Just because it's a question a lot of people have. People say, oh, he must be funded. Oh, he's, somebody's putting him up to this. It's not my impression. My impression is that you're doing it on your own. But I am wondering, things like the Charlie Kirk confrontation, right? A bunch of people showed up. I don't know if it was 8 out of 10 of the questions had to do with, your philosophy, this America First philosophy. Was that coordinated? Did you coordinate with those people? You know, you got a lot of well-spoken people up there to put their, and you know, the thing about the dancing Israelis was pretty funny too and provocative. Did you coordinate with people to set that up, and were you coordinating with people in order to disrupt these, you know, and get your point across at these events?
No. As far as being like directly involved in communicating, coordinating with the people, no, there was no direct coordination, and that's been what's I think why a lot of people are fascinated by it and interested by it is because it's a totally decentralized thing in the sense that my involvement as far as coordination goes as far as I said on my show the night before, this is the date, this is the time, show up, ask good questions, you know, here's some general tips, maybe talk about this, maybe talk about that. And people that watch the show, they drove out there, they showed up, and, you know, most of them followed my advice. So to the extent that it's direct, there was no direct coordination. It was all, you know, I guess people just watching my show and going out there and trying their best to rile Charlie Kirk up. Right.
Well, it definitely worked, and you guys have made an incredibly big impact from it being basically run out of your house right now, just you behind a microphone and inspiring, you know, people to think about these things. So let's talk about immigration because, you know, we may have some differences of opinion on it. From what I understand, right, the whole thing with immigration is a demographic question, which is a statistics question, basically, which is that immigrants, particularly non-white immigrants, tend to vote Democrat, right? And I do want to talk about how this is a left-right paradigm kind of thing. I mean, you guys are effectively, it's a political movement to make sure that Republicans get elected. Is that basically right?
I wouldn't say that's quite it. I would say that electoral politics is one of the things that will be affected by demographic change. And I think that is probably the most readily digestible consequence that I think helps people understand some of the broader consequences of demographic change, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yes, I know you talk about the broader consequences of it as well. You know, when I hear about it, though, the focus that I hear is on this, the way that they vote and the fact that if more immigrants come in, and particularly non-white immigrants, then we're going to have states like the state I just moved to, like Texas, turning blue, and that's viewed as a problem, right? So yes. I also heard you say, I believe when you were streaming that Charlie Kirk confrontation, that first one, that you don't want any immigration. Is that correct? I mean, what is your stance exactly on how immigration should work?
Yeah, I want no immigration for the foreseeable future. I think we've had and if you look at American history, it's so radical what's happening right now. People say that we're extremists. The extreme position is to have 60 years of uninterrupted immigration, where every year you have more immigrants than the previous year. Because for the rest of American history, you would have waves, you know, so you'd have a period of 5 to 10 years where you had lots of immigrants, sometimes longer. And then you'd have a period where you had very little immigration. You'd have another period where you'd bring in more people. Also, up until the 1965 Immigration Act, almost 80 to 90% of the immigrants were coming from Europe. You know, people talk about the waves, and some of the first waves were Germans. The waves in the 20th century were Italians or Eastern Europeans or something like that. Since 1965, it's been one interrupted and rising wave. The wave just keeps getting bigger, and it never ends, of Hispanics, Asians, and other assorted non-whites. So I think it's time now for, you know, what you would say is a commensurate. If that's the wave, then this is the calm sea, right? The wave is over, and so maybe for another 50 years we just have very little immigration, net zero, or maybe just zero immigration. I think we've had enough.
See, okay, so that's a really extreme position, right? You'll accept that.
I don't know. Again, I don't think so. I just told you, I think the opposite is extreme.
And the opposite is the status quo. And it's the status quo not only for the left, but also for the right, right? One of your problems with the right is that they support legal immigration, and you see as many problems in legal immigration as you do not, as you might see in illegal immigration. So let me just tell you a personal thing. So my wife is from the UK. She's white. And I had to go overseas to find somebody willing to marry me, right? And and she came here legally. She just got her green card. And if there were zero immigration, right, then that couldn't have happened, right? Mm-hmm. And she's conservative. She believes in supporting American values. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on the show. So what would be wrong with that, and would that not exist in the system you propose?
Well, the problem obviously is not people that are bringing over wives from the United Kingdom. I mean, the vast majority of immigration is it's unskilled workers, or it's when we talk about legal immigration, a lot of it is even highly skilled workers. Also, they're not coming from Europe. Almost all of them are coming from third world countries, are all coming from, and it's more important to say non-white countries. So, I mean, look, you're right in the sense that it might be impractical to say that nobody can ever come in America for the next 50 years. Obviously, it might be hyperbolic to say no more immigrants. I don't know what exactly the policies would look like, but I mean, right now we're bringing in more than 1 million legal immigrants every year. So to say net zero immigration would mean that on net, in other words, after you account for all the people that are leaving the country, you subtract that from the people that are coming in, and the number is zero. So maybe we could make some, accommodations for, extenuating circumstances like your own. But, I think when everybody thinks of immigration, they think of the 1 million plus people that are coming from Asia and Latin America, and they're coming and taking jobs, and they don't speak the language, and, they're not coming to assimilate and marry, and they're also not coming from Europe. So I would say that, sure, we could make some accommodations, maybe Europe only or something, or I don't know what exactly we could accommodate for, because obviously that doesn't sound like the problem to me. But ideally, we'd have no immigrants, period.
Ideally. Okay. So so on one hand, you're talking about optics, and you're talking about a political movement, and you're talking about what's possible. But then but at the same time, you're saying maybe it's hyperbolic to say no immigration, and you don't know how that would happen. So, shouldn't you be proposing something that you have an idea for how it would become a thing? Because to me, it's totally impossible. What you're proposing is never going to happen. So if you're about optics, if you're about making change, then why not propose things that you can actually do, right? That people might actually accept.
Well, I wouldn't say never say never. I would say never say never. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that we could get to zero immigration. I think a lot can change. As we saw with Donald Trump, a lot can change in a short amount of time politically in terms of what is possible and what is impossible. That doesn't mean I'm under any illusions about how difficult something like that would be to bring about. But I think what everybody recognizes is that what we represent is just radical reform to immigration. So when I say zero immigration, I mean, that's my position. But I think people understand that what we're talking about more broadly is that legal immigration is a problem. This is what we're trying to highlight. We're trying to highlight is this extreme situation that we've had for 60 years, which is, 1 million plus, in some cases 2 million plus legal immigrants per year. So it is obviously very different to say, you're going to talk about something 100 years ago, and you're going to engage in things that are going to get you censored and banned from social media or discredited or blacklisted, than it is to take up a position which, might be a little bit further to the right. It's sort of like, Patrick Buchanan in 1992. He ran for the Republican nomination for president against George H.W. Bush. And it became clear after a little while that he was probably not going to be able to primary George H.W. Bush, but he used his leverage to force George H.W. Bush further to the right on certain issues, because he had a significant following by the time of the 1992 Republican convention. And he said at that point, well, I don't have enough, delegates to win the nomination. But he said he did have enough support that he could leverage George H.W. Bush to move further to the right on culture issues like abortion and other things. I see similarly, this is vaguely what we're trying to attempt for this upcoming election in 2020, which is to say we're rallying the troops, we're rallying Trump supporters, and we're saying we're not happy with legal immigration. And maybe if Donald Trump were listening, or, Don Jr. was listening at UCLA, they might take that into consideration when they're running on the campaign trail in 2020, that a lot of their voters are going to be dissatisfied if the position of this administration is, illegal immigration is bad, but we can have as much legal immigration as possible. So I would say that they're different things. I would say it's optics is different than, being a little bit hyperbolic than maybe using leverage, forcing the issue on immigration.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and you have already, with the movement, created a shift, right? You've already had Charlie Kirk have to backtrack on some things he said in the past. Isn't that right?
Yes, exactly.
So you are having some of that influence, but I would argue that to a large segment of the population, that saying zero immigration or to say, zero non-white immigration is just as radical, perhaps as, questioning how many people died in the Holocaust. I mean, for a lot of people, that sounds, ridiculous and that it's never going to happen. And it's not. It is never going to happen. I mean, the Republican Party is never going to support that. And I guess I'll ask you the next question, because I am curious about your support of Donald Trump, is what changed with Donald Trump becoming president?
Well, I would say, again, never say never. Many things that we thought were impossible years ago have become possible. And that, things that are impossible become possible through God. It's also a Christian movement. I don't know how you feel about that, but we are true believers. In terms of Donald Trump and what has changed under him, I think, judging by the tone of your question, I think I may know where you stand on this. Don't want to be presumptuous, but I think I may know where this is going. I'll say that, although I was a Trump supporter in 2016, I, like many Trump supporters, are disappointed with the progress or the lack thereof. We are still in the Middle East, even specifically in Syria, where Trump has been trying to pull us out of there desperately for almost a year now. He said on December 21st, 2018, that he was going to pull all the troops out of Syria in 30 days, and it just never happened. And then it was a couple of months ago, he said he was pulling all the troops out of Syria, and we did pull, I think, about 1,000 troops out of Syria and into Iraq, and then immediately we sent hundreds back in, and then we found out that hundreds were staying as a residual force. And that's only one example of one of his big campaign promises that, there's just almost no, almost no follow-through, no execution on that. Same with immigration. So I would say that things have changed under Trump. Is that correct? Am I correct about the tone of the question? Is that what you're getting at there?
Well, I'll tell you this. And by the way, I do consider myself Christian in that I follow what Jesus Christ said. And I have questions about how the Christianity that you define, basically this form of Catholicism, which I believe is being redefined by these people in the same kind of head space that you're in. I'm baptized, confirmed Catholic, but I don't believe in the church. I believe in reading the book and interpreting it and trying to be like Jesus, basically, right? To me, that's what being Christian is. But as far as Donald Trump, I supported him over Hillary Clinton, obviously, but I would never vote for him. And I wonder, because of particularly one of the issues you're most concerned about is the influence of Israel in our politics and the influence of Israel in our foreign policy. And I don't know if there's ever been a president that's more Israel first than Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the first Jewish president, basically. His children are Jewish, his grandchildren are Jewish, and Kushner is, belongs to a Jewish supremacist cult, basically, Chabad Lubavitch. So I don't understand, and this was the first trouble I had with this, and he's not going to stop immigration. He's not anti-gay, he's not going to stop gay marriage or anything. He got trans out of the military. He's putting up a wall. So I understand he's made some progress as far as you guys are concerned on immigration, but I don't see what he's going to do to support your beliefs. He's never going to, especially when it comes to Israel. So this was a question I had about you is I didn't believe that you supported Donald Trump. In fact, I thought you were just saying that because the things you say you believe, Donald Trump isn't going to help out with. I mean, particularly on Israel. So how do you support him, considering that?
Well, I think you can support a politician without supporting everything they're about. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I know exactly what you're saying. One of our main points is Israel influence, and he's on the opposite side of us on that issue. So I totally get that. But, you know, I think you have to look at the bigger picture when it comes to Trump. This is what a lot of people struggle with is, you know, Trump as a politician, as a governor, you know, that is to say somebody who is governing the country, has fallen short and in many ways does betray us on some of these issues. In the case of Israel, he has been pretty pro-homosexual, sad to say.
Right.
But you have to understand what he represents more broadly. You know, what does Make America Great Again mean? What does America First mean? What does an outsider like Donald Trump represent for the political establishment? You know, to me, while the particularities don't exactly line up, I would say that as sort of a world historical figure, Donald Trump represents an opportunity to smash the existing political class. And I know that in many ways he has become in bed with them and he is inside with the swamp. You know, if you look at his cabinet, a lot of people are subverting him. But sort of this MAGA movement that he's created, this MAGA idea, I think is something that we would be foolish to throw out with some of the bad stuff that he endorses. You know, so for example, when he says America First, you know, to me, the idea of America First and that he says that is more important than, you know, that all the gibs that he does for Israel, because everybody can see that, you know, being Israel first is not America first. Bret Stephens did an article in New York Times last week where he said Israel cannot be safe in an America first world. So you can see where some of the things that he's putting out there, that he's putting out into the American consciousness, directly contradict the things that he's doing. Now, I don't say, okay, that means Donald Trump has no value and we can't support him and disavow him, because unfortunately, he's the best we got. You know, who else in the Republican Party, who else on the national level is going to come close to the progress that he's made? And I'll grant you, I'll be the first to say it's not as best as we could get, but compare Donald Trump, we'll talk about shithole countries, and I know it's just tweets and statements, or, you know, even pushing back against legal immigration with the RAISE Act or building a wall. You know, you might say that he's not our guy or he's not all the way there, but compared to everybody else, he's miles ahead. And the point of what we're trying to do is not to say we're satisfied with where Trump is, but to build upon Trump and say, you know, maybe Trump is the first iteration, maybe Trump is the 1.0 of what an America First movement could look like. Maybe somebody like him was required to break things up, and he obviously had the money and the clout and the fame. I think he's one of the only people that could have done something like this. How can we build upon that and sort of refine some of the things that he put out there? So that's basically my position.
I just don't understand how you can support somebody that it's diametrically opposed to what you believe in, which in particular is Israel, homosexuals, gun rights. I mean, how can you? I don't endorse. I don't really recommend voting, you know, and giving the government our consent to rule over us, particularly when they do such a terrible job, when they betray us all the time. So why do you have to vote? Why does it have to be a right-left thing? Because I don't see what the Republicans are doing for you. Why don't you start your own party? You know, it'd be really ideologically pure. I mean, you could really make a difference that way. The Republican Party is lost. You know, the Democrats are lost. You know, there's nothing there for us. You know, it's a ruling class. It's never going to change. You say Donald Trump is an outsider. He was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He's friends with Bill Clinton. You know, he goes way back. He's inside as it gets. He picked a cabinet that was as inside as it gets. You know, John Bolton, Mike Pompeo. I mean, he's got the worst. He's surrounded himself not just with bad people, but the worst people. You know, Rothschild agents, people from Goldman Sachs. You know, he said in the debates, he said the Fed was the problem, low rates were the problem. Now he wants negative interest rates. I mean, he just wants bad things for your life, which I don't know if you understand or not. But so that's why I ask. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Actually, it doesn't make any sense to me when you say he's the best we got. I mean, that's like saying if you have a choice, right, between the old douche and the turd sandwich, that you say, oh, well, I'll take the douche, And so that's all I can say is, I don't see anything redeeming about him. He wants red flag laws. He wants guns taken away.
I don't think he wants guns taken away.
Well, he said no due process. He said he wants people to have their guns taken away with no due process with these red flag laws. He said that to Nancy Pelosi.
I think that after what was it, the El Paso shooting or whatever, I think he paid lip service to that. But as far as I'm aware, that nothing ever came of that from the federal government. And for you to extrapolate and say, oh, that means he's anti-gun. I don't think, I'm not totally pleased with everything he's done on guns, but and I would say my response to all of that is I think your position doesn't make any sense. Okay. I think this, it's sort of just like unwilling to grapple with reality. I mean, it's unwilling to be pragmatic or practical. I think that's maybe the real divide, is not necessarily on the issues, but how do we approach these issues? You could say all these things about Donald Trump, and probably most of it I'll agree. I could quibble with some of the details. For example, John Bolton. Did John Bolton really affect the foreign policy that much? I mean, as far as I know, we did not start any new wars, not any major ground operations. The presence in Syria, let's be real, it's 1,000 troops, right? Or maybe it might have been up to 5,000, including contractors at one point. That's not like we have 17,000 troops in Italy, to give you context. So I would push back on some of these gripes, some of these complaints. But to me, it just sounds very whiny. In the start your own party business, it costs millions upon millions and millions of dollars to start a party. You look at even some of the well-established third parties, like the Green Party or like the Libertarian Party. They can't win local elections. I think they're lucky if they win state representatives, let alone representation in national government or whatever. I think, what we have to just say straight up is, I think people like yourself who like to be, I will tell the truth and I will never compromise. I will never, be optical or be tactical. I will never vote. I will not give consent to the government. The question is, what exactly are you trying to accomplish? What exactly do you think you're trying to accomplish? The idea that there's going to be this mass consciousness awakening, to me, I mean, this is like on the same level as theosophy, people that are thinking aliens are going to come down and lift us up, they're going to lift the veil for us. I think we have to grapple with the fact that there is a ruling elite. They are exponentially more powerful, maybe the most powerful ruling elite in human history. And how do we go about reforming the system? It's a very difficult question. And I don't think there's any good answers. I don't think there's anything that seems like it's going to work imminently. But what we're trying to do is take something that seems to be making a lot of these people upset, which is Donald Trump, for what you say about him being Rothschild and Epstein and so on. It seems like a lot of people are out to get him in the media, in a lot of these supranational institutions, organizations. We look at something like that and we say, okay, maybe this is a start. Maybe we can use some of the mainstream media that has followed up behind him, a president that has 90% approval, talking about America first and so on. And maybe we could sort of, I don't want to say hijack that, because I think I am the Trump base. I voted for him. We can sort of take that and draft behind it. We can, sort of tailgate behind that, use that energy, use him to block a lot of this resistance and rise up sort of in place of that ultimately one day. But I would say that this kind of, well, he didn't do this and he did this. And, I am familiar with the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, but it's just willfully ignoring the reality when you think that he's the same as any other politician or something like that.
Well, I don't. Well, he is a politician. I will say that. And he won because he's a great politician in the end. He traveled all the right places. He runs these great rallies. I agree with, I defend him from being attacked by the press. I think it's unbelievable, actually. I've never seen anything like it. I can't believe how they try to take down this president. And you're forced to defend him because of the baseless attacks against him. So I don't mean to pile on from that direction for sure. I will say, you say I'm being unrealistic, but you have views that I think would widely be considered unrealistic. For example, taking away women's right to vote, zero immigration, right? I mean, these are things that are never, ever going to happen. And I don't know if you're just doing it to be provocative or, if you really think it'll make a difference. I mean, tell me about this women, taking away women's right to vote. Do you really believe that should be the case?
Well, again, I think you have to separate out what you actually believe is ideal and what you think we can achieve. I mean, I will never go on the record and say that women getting the right to vote was a good thing, because I think we can all agree, and I think all the evidence shows that it was a big mistake, big disaster. Who is driving this electoral winter that we talk about? It's women. They've been driving it from the beginning. So I am against third wave, second wave, first wave feminism, all of it. Now, that said, I've never gone, my crusade has never been, we're trying to repeal the 19th Amendment. I've made this clear before. If you're asking me in like an academic way, you think the 19th Amendment was good or bad? I would say it was bad. You think the 19th Amendment should exist? I would say no. But if you're asking me like what my goals are, well, we're trying to advance very simply is a traditional role for women, and so I don't consider a part of my platform to repeal the 19th Amendment. But generally, we want to end a lot of this feminism stuff. And if we have to start from the most extreme, then, we could do that. But, I wouldn't say that that's my mission is to get that repealed.
Well, I understand. I guess it's because I was trying to find out exactly what the tenets are of this America First thing. And that's part of it. So what went wrong, actually, just so I understand, I don't know if it's another statistical thing, like they don't vote for Republicans or they don't vote conservative, is what went wrong from giving women the right to vote, just so I understand, because I'm all for the traditional, I got married finally because, I believe in family and, I'd love to have kids and, I want to do the right thing. And I believe, a man should be able to make the income and take care of a family. And there are a lot of things in our society, particularly feminism, which is designed to destroy the family, So I totally agree with you as far as that goes. The only thing is like, again, it's this whole thing about being realistic, right? You talk about optics, but then you talk about things like this. And even though I found out Ann Coulter says the same thing, but what did go wrong, just to educate me on it?
Yeah, well, I think it stems from the fact that women, I think, in significant qualitative ways, have different brains than men. I think they just think differently than men. One of the primary things that I think about is in terms of ethics. I think women are just almost simply incapable of thinking impersonally with a justice-based ethics in mind. I think that almost all of their thinking, political and otherwise, is very much dependent on relationships and particulars and specifics. I don't think they can really think very much in terms of abstractions and concepts and things like that. And this is why, for example, unfortunately, some of the only data that I've seen on this is from libertarians, but they talk about how, if you look at when women got the right to vote in this country, you can sort of track that for every increase in the proportion of women voting, in other words, the proportion of the electorate that's voting that is women, you see higher government spending. And, why do you think that is? Well, women want to see people taken care of. They want to see welfare. They want to see things like that. I think women are more inclined to vote for things like mass immigration. If you look at the polling, even among Republicans, women do not support a border wall. They do not support secure borders. They do not support cutting legal immigration. In fact, they support amnesty. They support pathway to citizenship. It's horrible in general. It's horrible for liberals and even for Republicans. The polling on this for women in terms of support for the border wall is abysmal. So I would say that that's indicative of, these differences in mindset. And we can say that one mindset is objectively better for politics than the other. It's definitely better to have a justice-based ethics than a care-based ethic. I mean, I think that's pretty clear.
What is your experience with women? Where are you getting all this information? I mean, have you been in a relationship for any period of time, or have you pursued that?
Well, I just get it from experience. I've I've been in some relationships with women, and I know women. I've got a sister, I've got a mother, and I've known women my whole life. And I think it's pretty clear from I have a good friend of mine who told me this, and I think this is very funny and also reflective of my thinking on this. A friend of mine who I call QAnon colloquially, he will say that, when he started getting to the pickup artist culture and some of these tactics that people like Roosh or others will use to pick up women, he said he started to notice that the same bag of tricks always seems to work. And he says, maybe if that's the case, maybe if it's the same sort of very simple little verbal or mental tricks that get women to tick or do what you want, maybe there's something going on there. And I sort of feel similarly. I think it doesn't take many interactions with women to realize they're mostly all the same and to pick up on some of these patterns and sort of the basic premise there with them. So, people say, oh, Nick isn't married or Nick doesn't have a girlfriend right now. How does he know anything about women? It's like, you don't really need, I don't think, a huge sample to begin to understand what's going on with them. They're kind of NPCs.
Okay, well, that's interesting, because I don't know how you're going to end up in a relationship where you share things, and if you view women as NPCs, and then as far as this pickup artist thing goes, and as far as them being predictable, what about guys? I mean, how easy is it to pick up a guy from the bar for a woman? I mean, as far as being more predictable and easier to manipulate, as far as the pickup artist thing goes, girls don't have to go to school to be a pickup artist. They just show their tits and it's over. They don't even have to be good looking. So how are women more simple-minded than men, in that respect?
Well, I think it's different because with men, it's clearly about an appetite. I mean, I don't think you would say that, if somebody gets hungry and they go and somebody gives them a hamburger, that makes them necessarily simple-minded or something like that.
I don't understand. You're saying because men want sex, then it's okay that they don't discriminate, basically, or?
I'm saying that it's different. I'm saying that when it comes to women, they are, because we're not simply talking about sex. I mean, sure, pickup artists, the goal is to get sex, but I mean, we're talking, generally speaking, that with women, there is a very, very simple correlation between, what buttons you press and what outcome you get, in terms of, it's almost like, when I say NPC, it's like this very automated response, like there's a very limited amount of options in a dialogue tree. Different buttons you could press, strings you can pull, and you get the desired response. They're very easily manipulated. And that's not to say that, in general, people are not easily manipulated. I think you'd be right that men and women are easy to manipulate. But I think with women, it is so cut and dry. It is so simple in terms of what makes them tick. Whereas compared to men, I mean, sure, if you dangle sex in front of a man or, anything, then sure, I mean, and men will jump at that. But I think that's very different than when it comes to women, how you've just got this wholesale manipulation going on with them. So I would say it's even a little bit bigger than that. I would say that women are almost, in a lot of respects, incapable. That's the other difference is, sure, yeah, you might have NPC men. I'm not going to dispute the existence of NPC men and people that are simple-minded. But I think with men, at the very least, you have men that are not that way. I think you would be pressed to find a lot of exceptions when it comes to women. I've said this before. It's almost a difference in terms of capacity, that I think women in some sense are just not even able to get to this higher realm, where they're not subject to these things. So, I mean, that's basically my position.
Okay. Well, you'd have to be my wife, because she doesn't, fall in any of those. I'm just saying my experience, right? And I've had a lot of experience with all kinds of different women, right? And there are certain women that are more predictable than other women, and they can be annoying in a lot of ways and other things. But it's, people are making fun of me, but she's not predictable, right? I mean, I can't easily manipulate her and stuff, and she doesn't have predictable views. She's got a lot of different opinions, which I think are well informed and so forth. And because of your point of view, it's going to be a turnoff to a lot of women. And I'm just going to argue, well, first of all, it's going to be hard for you to, get into a relationship that can turn into a marriage and stuff with that point of view. I mean, if you just believe women are simple-minded and that they're easy to manipulate and stuff, you might find an unsatisfactory relationship where, she just does what you say or whatever it is. But I don't think you can have a successful movement without also having women in that movement. And, I was wondering about the kind of people that watch your show. I don't know if it's 95% male or what have you, but I just wonder how your movement is going to connect with women if you just think they're all simple-minded. And I'm just going to argue you have zero, you're 21 years old, you don't have any experience. You're just talking based on, kind of what you've heard or what you imagine, right?
I would say it's the opposite. You say that we can't have a successful movement without women. I would say that it would be an unsuccessful movement with the women in it. And take a look at the women that have been in the movement. There's sort of this meme, which I don't think is even a joke or a meme. It's just serious, about not including e-girls, not letting women into the leadership of it. I think, like I said, you'd be pressed to find a single example of a woman who's in the movement who is, and there are some exceptions. I would say Michelle Malkin's great, Ann Coulter's great, Faith Goldie's been good, but a lot of women have caused us a lot of trouble. I mean, Katie McHugh is a perfect example. There's this girl, Samantha, who's caused nightmares for us because she was a turncoat. And that's not to say that men don't do it either, but it seems like with women, it's always a problem. They can't be trusted. They cause division. They get people fighting. Some guys want to impress the girls. Other guys want to stay focused. So I would say it's the opposite on that. And, in terms of a marriage, I would also say it's the opposite. Men have been getting in relationships with women forever, thinking they're simple-minded and being upfront about that. I think even today, women almost prefer that. And they would never admit it. They would never say that. And that's part of, the irrationality. That's sort of exactly what I'm talking about. They would never admit it, but I think most women would prefer somebody who says, or at the very least acts, in the way that I describe about the relationship and the nature of men and women. So I would say that I believe the complete opposite on the marriage question, on the movement question. The audience is like 95% men, and that's because for the most part, only men are interested in politics. I don't really know many women interested in politics, and if they are, it's to try to attract attention from men. So I think we just agree. I don't know if your wife is there right now. Maybe I don't want to say that's why you're saying the things you're saying, but I will never stop lifting the veil on women purely because of pressure from women. Maybe that's where you have to be optical, you have to be tactical here. But I'm a truther when it comes to women. That is one principle I will never go against.
Okay, no, I understand. It's just, respectfully, you have very limited experience, right? So I expect your opinions on this to develop over time, especially if you want to. I'll have to send him a new link. Am I live? Is the sound working? Let me know. If not, then I just have to wrap it.
Yes.
Okay, sound's working again? Okay. All right. Let's see if... All right, I'm trying to get him back on. Sorry about the technical issue. I sent him a new link to the thing. We should have sound again. He already stayed a little bit longer than he was supposed to, so we appreciate Nick taking the time. Let's see if we can get him back. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Really interesting conversation so far. I want to ask him one more question if I can. We'll see. Hey, Nick.
Hello.
All right, great. All right, I think we're good now. I was just going to ask you one more thing, and that was about the gay question. What do you want to do with the gays? What is your position on that? I'm just curious.
We just don't want people like Rob Smith leading the conservative movement. I mean, implicit in somebody who identifies as gay is they've taken on a sin as their identity. A lot of people have said, oh, well, other people sin too. And it's like, yeah, of course. I mean, being a sodomite is a sin and being a fornicator is a sin. But nobody goes on stage and says, hi, I'm a black fornicator. Like Rob Smith says, I'm a black gay guy. And God loves that, So I think we just don't want those people representing us.
Where did you get the idea that Jesus had any problem with gays?
The Bible.
Where did Jesus say it?
Well, Jesus doesn't say a lot of things that we also know Jesus isn't on board with. You know what I mean?
So you're just assuming that's what he would have said, or because I'm trying to figure it out because you're Catholic,
yeah.
And if you're you're supposed to believe what the Pope says, right? And I think the Pope basically accepts gay people at this point,
no, he
right?
Doesn't.
No? He's been really friendly with a lot of gay people. I know
he's been warmer towards them, but the position is still that sodomy is deeply disordered.
Okay, and okay, so what would you like people who are gay to do? So do you accept that people are just gay, or do you believe that people choose to be gay, or?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Probably, the question about whether people, I guess the question is if it's a mutable characteristic is really the issue. I don't know if it's genetic. It probably isn't. I would say it's mostly environmental. And even if it is environmental, do people really have a say in it? I would probably say for the most part, no. I don't think people are if people are given a choice, I don't think they would choose to be homosexual. But people do have a choice of whether they want to engage in homosexual acts, and that is a sin. The Bible says that it's to have a certain predilection or an inclination, I don't think is a sin in itself. To be lustful, or think about sinful things is crossing the line. I think to engage is crossing the line. But if people feel attraction towards people, I think that's I don't know if there's anything intrinsically wrong about that or sinful. And it's probably very tough for people. And I don't know what people like that should do. I would say that they shouldn't promote it to children. I would say it should not be normalized. And certainly it doesn't belong on, representing the conservative movement. And that's been my position.
So there's something unconservative about it, even if a gay person supports the rest of the values, and you accept that it's not a choice, most likely, like people are just gay and they can assume whether they want to have sex or not, right? So and heterosexual people could do that too, but you're not talking about heterosexual sodomy, right? Because oral sex is sodomy. Is that also a sin?
Yes.
Have you ever engaged in that before?
No,
and you don't plan to?
No.
Interesting.
And this is what people do. People like to make it about moral equivalency, but we're talking about something very specific. I've heard this argument for the past couple of weeks. It's like, oh well, if you do sexual sins, well then you have no right. You have no right to talk about homosexuality. But we're talking about something very specific, which is deviancy that is out of control and it's being pushed on children. So. And look, I am a believer in Catholic sexual morality, and I adhere to it. But it's really neither here nor there, even if I wasn't adhering to it. The point is there is a clear and obvious agenda to normalize deviancy, and it's not just people getting married or they and I think it's bad to be an adulterer. It's bad to engage in other forms of sodomy. I'll admit that. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about, if a husband and wife engage in sexual acts that are not permitted. We're talking about an obvious agenda to push homosexuality, which is by its very nature promiscuous, deviant, perverse, all the rest. Homosexuals are not out there, getting married and being monogamous, and maybe they do some weird thing, right? We're talking about pedophilia. We're talking about disease. We're talking about people that are engaging in thousands of hookups with thousands of partners and doing the most perverse things. It is by its nature perverse because it's disordered and unnatural. And that's, I think, what we're getting at. So, somebody like Peter Thiel, I don't have a huge problem with him. He got outed. I don't even think he was public about it. He keeps it to himself, whatever. It's not ideal, but it is what it is. Rob Smith is out there saying, I'm a gay conservative. It's okay to be gay. It's okay to be a gay conservative. We should accept this. I can be a Christian. And, we're talking about the right wing. Maybe you could have that on the left or even the mainstream, because we expect that. But we don't expect that from the Christian right-wing conservative movement. It has no place being representative among the leadership like that.
Interesting. Well, you accept that when you say it's unnatural, it's hard to say, well, I just have to push back on it because animals are, are born gay, and yeah. You accept that people are just gay, right? It's not, at least in their head, they can choose whether or not to consummate that. But, as far as it being unnatural, and as far as it being definitely or always promiscuous or what have you, again, I don't know what your experience is, because I know a lot of gay people that are in way more committed relationships, and in a lot of cases, they're more, family oriented than your average heterosexual. And I was engaged in all kinds of deviancy myself, but you're not going to give me any pushback for it because, I'm straight, right? You're not going to say that I'm pushing my agenda on other people. I've learned, and now I'm in a traditional, relationship. But, to attribute that to being gay. Now, I totally agree with you, and I understand where this is coming from, because there is a radical LGBTQ agenda, particularly a radical trans agenda, and they are trying to put sexuality in front of our kids, inappropriately. I think a lot of people can agree with that. And so the position on the other side is equally extreme. It's just, once again, it's one of those things. It's like women, take away women's right to vote, take away gay people's right to get married. I know you identify as a paleo conservative, but these are, these end up being radical views, which are as radical just from the other point of view as the views that are coming from the other side. I understand that you think it's based in religion, but once again, you're just assuming what Jesus would have said. Jesus hung out with the prostitutes, with the deviants, right?
Here we go.
No,
well,
I
got to push back on all that.
Okay.
And then I got to go, because
sure.
We're a little bit over time, and
no problem.
I've enjoyed
it. I appreciate
it. I've enjoyed it. But I do have to push back on all of this. In the first place, you say, well, animals engage in homosexuality, which to me is hilarious, because it's like, we're not animals. If you have to resort to saying, well, animals are, doing this. Well, I don't think God intended for us to be like beasts, for us to be, animal, I think in itself is sort of like a pejorative. You say,
all I'm saying is that people are just made that way. So in order to say that it's deviant or that it's not natural, you're saying that God makes mistakes. And I don't know.
No, that's not what I'm saying. There might be a naturalistic, which is different. There might be a naturalistic thing about homosexuality, and I'll give you, it depends on your definition of natural. Because, of course, animals do a lot of things that we would consider evil and wrong and perverse. Animals kill their babies. Animals, if you look like praying mantises, they eat their spouses. Animals are not really the standard for morality, because they're not rational. We are rational.
I understand.
And I would say that nobody is born homosexual. And moreover, even if people are born with homosexual inclinations, that merely means that they're born with the desire to sin. So to say that somebody should refrain from sinning is not to say that God made a mistake. Man is fallen. Man makes mistakes. And man can choose to do a lot of things, engage in a lot of perversities, or pursue appetites that are sinful. And I would say, I don't know where you get this impression that I don't go after heterosexuals that are pushing degeneracy. We do that all the time on the show. But when we're talking about Charlie Kirk, and that's where it came from, in this case, it was so egregious that we have somebody who purports to be a Christian conservative, and they're attempting to normalize homosexuality. Now casual sex and adultery and birth control and all that has been around for like 50 years. That's not to say that we're not pushing back on it. We definitely are. But it is to say that this is like such an egregious thing that he would try to push this on us that it had to be called out. Right. And I would say that, when you say it's extreme, being a paleocon is extreme, it's not extreme at all. 25 years ago, all of my positions were mainstream. Immigration, homosexuality, foreign policy, all this stuff was mainstream. It was only in very recent times that this has become controversial. And then with regard to the Bible, Jesus Christ hang out with, I hear this all the time. Well, Christ hung out with prostitutes. If Christ came back today, he would not be hanging out with unrepentant drag queens, homosexuals, bug chasers. People. You think Christ would be leading the gay pride parade with, people in leather walking on all fours on leashes? That's absurd.
Well, that's not a fair.
We're talking about the Bible,
but that's not a fair. I mean,
but that's what you're implying.
No.
Implying is unrepentant sin is what Christ was about. It wasn't. No. He was with repentant tax collectors, prostitutes, people that left sin and joined him. Now, if Rob Smith said, "I've seen the light. I'm not a homosexual anymore. I worship Christ," I would say that's amazing. Good for you. But that's not. But he's saying he's having promiscuous anal sex, and Christ is about that when it's not. And
Right.
I'll also say, you say, well, heterosexuals engage in degeneracy, and I know homosexuals who are more traditional. That's how they present. That's how I thought it was for the longest time. I used to be one of these people who sort of milquetoast on gay marriage. I said, let them get married. What difference does it make? Because my conception of homosexuals was Modern Family and Glee, that when you have two guys hanging out, they're getting a malt at the ice cream parlor and they're going to see a drive-in movie. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is disgusting, perverse, sick things. And, you can look at, there's data on this. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff that's been written about it. You can even just look at what they themselves talk about. I mean, these people are not qualitatively the same as straight people, not even close, So, you could just, if you know any homosexuals, just go onto their phone, maybe check out their Grindr profile or whatever. I can assure you it is far from traditional, and it would sicken even what is considered a degenerate heterosexual person by the standards of heterosexuals. So, but, okay. I guess we can agree to disagree on that.
Well, no, once again, I don't know what your experience is being around gay people. That's all. It's the same as I don't know what your experience is being around women. But I just wanted to clarify with you, and it's, your views on lots of things are going to evolve over time. And so, I don't know where you're going to be on the issue later, but you have to have experience. You got to talk to people. You got to know what they're really about, and then you can decide if the conclusions you've come to based on, reading about it or are correct. I mean, so anyway, you've already given me a lot of time. I really appreciate it. I really support what you're doing. I support free speech. I tune into your show. I think you're one of the most talented guys to come around to do this thing in a long time. You're able to carry a whole show. So I wish you the best of luck. And I just, really wanted to clarify some of your positions and have a conversation with you. So I really do appreciate it. Thanks for coming on my show.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate the kind words. We disagree, and it's fun, and that's what it's about. I think, what I said earlier is true. I do support what you guys are doing, exploring the truth, lifting the veil. It's so important, but I think we have different takes on the strategy. But thanks so much for having me. It was great. Cool, man. Thanks a lot for coming on the show. All right. Take it easy. Bye-bye. All right. See ya. All right. That was great. Yeah, that was a pretty enlightening interview with Nick. We have some disagreements about different things, but that's the way it should be. People should be allowed to share their views, especially when they disagree on things. So hopefully we'll be able to continue these kind of conversations.